I know you see that there. Today, I'll be showing you how I made lobster macaroni and cheese. So welcome back to Lit by Lily. As always, the ingredients will be in the description box. But here's a quick breakdown. I'll be using elbow noodles, 2 lobster tails, butter, cream of chicken, Old Bay, Woo sauce, evaporated milk, cream cheese, blocks of mild, medium, and sharp cheese, paprika, cayenne pepper, black pepper, and garlic. I'll also be using about a 1/3 cup of chicken broth to season the water that I'll be boiling my noodles in. I'll be bringing over 2 quarts of water to a boil in a 3-quart saucepan. Alright, next I'll be grating my cheese, the mild, medium, and sharp. I strongly suggest using block cheese. However, I understand that not everybody may be able to get a hold of some block cheese. If you would like to use pre-packaged shredded cheese, go ahead, but understand that it may not adhere to your noodle as well and it may not melt as well. Go ahead and preheat your oven to 400 degrees. Now once my water started to boil, I added my noodles and I followed directions that are on the back of the box. Always make sure that you're stirring your noodles occasionally. You do not want your noodles to stick to the bottom of the pot. When handling seafood, it's best to keep it on chill as much as possible. Here I have my lobster in an ice bath waiting to be cut in half. Now after I cut these bad boys open, I went and removed the vein. The vein is dark in color and it's going to be slimy in texture. Now after I removed the vein out of both tails, I grabbed my cast iron skillet, I put it on medium heat, I took 2 tablespoons of butter and threw it over in there to melt. Now being that the lobster will be going in the oven, I'm going to be cooking the lobster about 60% in this skillet, which was about 2.5 minutes for me. Now while the lobster was in there dancing with the butter, I added garlic, Old Bay, and black pepper. I recommend season to taste. So whichever seasoning you like the best, you may want to add a little bit more. Whichever one you don't care for as much, just add a little bit less. But I suggest using at least a tablespoon. Lobster changes color and cooks very fast. You have to be careful not to overcook it. Like I said, we're not going to cook this all the way because it's going in the oven. If you overcook it, it's going to be rubbery in texture. Now I'm going to set the lobster to the side and create my roux. The butter that's already in the skillet has that nice lobster flavor already in it, so I'll be adding another 2 tablespoons to start my roux. Now in the midst of this, my noodles became done. So I grabbed the colander, I drained them in the colander and shocked them in cold water so the cooking process can stop. After my butter melted completely, I began to spread flour all throughout the skillet. My recipe called for about a 1/3 cup of flour. However, I used just a little bit less than that 1/3 cup. When making a roux, you want to keep your utensil moving as much as possible. A roux will burn so quickly, but you want to make sure that it's getting heated up all the way around and evenly. I took some of the evaporated milk and added into the roux. I did not add it all right away because we want to gradually add to the sauce. In total, I used about 9 ounces of the milk. So to begin with, I used about 3 to 4 ounces. Starting this low will give me time to make sure that the mixture is combining completely. Because there is nothing worse than tasting a roux that tastes like flour. So as you just saw, I added in the rest of the milk that I requested in my recipe. At this point, I suggest dropping your sauce from medium heat down to low because we're getting ready to add the cheese in. And we want to add it in slowly. And not only do we want to add it in slowly, we want to make sure that it does not burn. So here you'll see I'm adding in all my cheeses to include my cream cheese. Now for this particular recipe, I like to add in cream of chicken. That cream of chicken gives it such a nice pop and flavor. Trust me on this. Now as I continue to get this cheese sauce nice, melted, and smooth, I added in paprika, black pepper, and garlic, as well as the Worcester sauce. For this particular recipe, I like the sauce to be thick. I don't know why, but every time I make the lobster mac and cheese, I like for that sauce to be kind of thick. Ooh, and it looks so good. Now, if you prefer your sauce to not be as thick as mine, add in another ounce or two of milk. Now, it's best to add the cheese to the noodles versus adding the noodles to the cheese. That way you can determine how you like your mac and cheese. If you want more cheese, you add a little bit more, and it's easier to add than to take away. After I got my mixture to the consistency that I liked it, I began to move my lobster from its shell. Now I'll be cutting up my lobster to about 1/2 inch, maybe a little bit smaller, thick for my mac and cheese. However, if you like bigger chunks, leave it, make it bigger. If you want it diced up, dice it up. If you want it minced, mince it up. This is just my preference, but just know that the options are pretty much endless with this. I added the entire cheese mixture to my noodles, and I took the cast iron skillet and cleaned it out because I'll be using that same skillet to bake this in the oven. Next, I added my lobster to my macaroni and cheese mixture. I rubbed down my cast iron skillet with about 2 to 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil so that the macaroni and cheese won't stick. After I filled up my cast iron skillet, everything from this point on was optional. Okay, so I took 2 tablespoons of butter and melted it in a microwave safe bowl. I then added breadcrumbs till I got a sand-like consistency. After I got it to that sand-like consistency, I added it on top of my macaroni and cheese. Whew. Say that 3 times fast. Now, when I say optional, I'm referring to the breadcrumbs and the cheese. What's not optional is baking it in the oven. Anyways, I took that medium cheese and I cut some nice little squares out of that cheese to place on top. After placing my cheese randomly, I decided to go back over it with a nice garnish of paprika and parsley. This cast iron skillet went in the middle rack of the oven for about 15 minutes at 400 degrees. And baby, it came out looking like a stimulus check with somebody with 4 or 5 kids. It's best to let this sit for about 10 minutes. However, if you can't help yourself, dig right in. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch. See you next time.